Hey friends, in this rapid review video, we're going to look at adding fractions with unlike denominators. So let's take a look at our problem. 1/10 plus 3/4. The very first thing that we're going to do is estimate our answer using the benchmark fractions of 0, 1/2, and 1. And this will help us make sure that when we get our answer, it's just around what it should be. So let's look here. 1/10. When we estimate 1/10, we're going to either round it to 0, 1/2, or 1 whole. Well, that's 1 out of 10 pieces. I know the halfway point is 5 out of 10 pieces, and the 1 whole point is 10 out of 10 pieces. So 1/10 is very close to having no pieces at all. So I'm going to round that answer to 0. 3/4, on the other hand, is very close to 1 whole because 4/4 equals 1 whole. So I'm going to round that to 1 whole. 0 plus 1 equals 1. That means that my answer should be around 1 whole. Now, let's move on to step 2. Check denominators. My denominators are 10 and 4. Unlike, so I can't just go ahead and add. Instead, I'm going to need to find a common denominator. Remember, there are 2 ways to find common denominators. We can find the least common denominator, or we can find the easiest common denominator. Either way works, and I'm going to show you in this video how to do it both ways. So, the first thing we're going to look at is the least common denominator, and we do that by finding multiples of our denominators. Our denominators are 10 and 4. So remember, to find multiples, you just multiply your denominators. 10 times 1 is 10. 10 times 2 is 20. 10 times 3 is 30. 10 times 4 is 40. And I'm not going to go past that because I think I already see my least common multiple, but I'm going to check it to make sure. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16, and 4 times 5 is 20. And I stop there because I have found a common denominator. 20 is a multiple of 10 and of 4. So 20 is my least common denominator. So that's going to be the denominator I use to go to step number 4 and make equivalent fractions. Let's rewrite our problem vertically. 1/10 plus 3/4. All right, step number 4 says I need to make equivalent fractions. I'm going to make equivalent fractions using my least common denominator of 20, which means both of my equivalent fractions will have a denominator of 20 because the only way I can add fractions is if the denominators are the same. All right, 10 times 2 gets me to 20. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So my first equivalent fraction is 2 20ths. Do the same thing on the bottom. 4 times 5 equals 20. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top. 3 times 5 equals 15. So my second equivalent fraction is 15 20ths. Now I have common denominators, so I can go to step number 5, which is to add. Remember, we only add the numerators. 15 plus 2 is 17. My denominator remains the same, 17 20ths. Simplify if necessary. Can I simplify 17 20ths? Is there any number that goes into 17 and 20? And the answer is no. There is no number because 17 can only be created by doing 1 times 17. And 17 cannot go into 20. So that's my simplified answer. So now I'm going to check it with my estimated answer. 17 20ths should be close to 1 whole. And in fact, it is. Because when I estimate my answer using my benchmark fractions of 0, 1/2, and 1 whole, I can see that 0 out of 20 pieces would be close to 0. 10 out of 20 pieces would be close to 1/2, and 20 out of 20 pieces would be close to 1 whole. I have 17 out of 20, which is closer to 20 out of 20. So it is close to 1 whole, so I know that my answer is correct, 17 20ths. So that's how we would find it using the least common denominator. Let's do the same thing, but this time, let's use the easiest common denominator. Remember, the way that we find the easiest common denominator is to just multiply our two denominators together. 10 times 4 equals 40. Our easiest common denominator is 40. So that was step 3 using the ECD. Let's move to step 4, make equivalent fractions. So I'm going to rewrite my problem again, 1/10 plus 3/4. But this time, instead of using my least common denominator of 20, I'm going to use my easiest common denominator of 40. So both equivalent fractions will have a denominator of 40. We're on step number 4. All right, here we go. 4 times 10 gives me 40. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top. 3 times 10 equals 30. So 30/40ths is my first equivalent fraction. 10 times 4 equals 40. What I do to the bottom, I do to the top. 1 times 4 equals 4. 4/40ths is my second equivalent fraction. Now we're going to add, reminding ourselves that we only add the numerator. 4 plus 30 equals 34, and my denominator stays the same, 40ths. 34/40ths is my answer. However, I can tell that it is not in simplest form. And step number 6 says we need to simplify if necessary. I know that it's not in simplest form because 34 and 40 are both even numbers, which means I can divide it by 2. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to divide 34 by 2, and I'm going to divide 40 by 2 to get a simplified answer. 34 divided by 2, I don't know off the top of my head, so I'm going to go down here and I'm just going to do a really quick division problem of 34 divided by 2. Well, let's see. I know that if I do 10 times 2 is 20. Subtract that out, and that gets me to 14. Well, now I know this easy peasy lemon squeezy because 7 times 2 equals 14. Subtract it out, and that gets me to 0. Add up my partial quotients to get an answer of 17. So 34 divided by 2 is 17. 40 divided by 2 I already know, and that equals 20. 17/20ths, which was the answer that we got with our least common denominator as well. So either way, whether you use least common denominator or easiest common denominator, we get the answer of 17/20ths. When we use easiest common denominator, you will have to simplify. Again, we check our answer with the estimated answer, and we see that it is close to 1. So there you go. That is how you add fractions with unlike denominators.